Okay, 8/28, 2019. This is part two of the series of videos. I'm not sure how many are going to be in the series, but of the introduction to where I'm reading. And anyway, from the introduction of my manuscript, Ethical Presence TM. Okay, so now we're picking up where we left off in video one, which was the quote from Robert Bresson or Bresson, depending on how you pronounce it or how it's properly pronounced. The artist is someone who is unable to do things as others do them. That was the quote that we left off on. Okay. I was teaching a group of college professors a class entitled Finding and Exploring Your Teacher Voice. The class considered what this book considers, consciously asserting one's humanity in a professional role to the benefit of oneself and others. Now I say here, I'm an actor. I was an actor. I don't do it anymore, among many other things, as I've already talked about in video one. Lawyer, improvisational actor, Second City main stage, work with Meryl Streep, blah, blah, blah. College professor. And while I was teaching this class, I made an illustrative example involving me, a white man, playing an elderly African-American woman. And many in the class were shocked. They said, "How could you ever do such a thing?" And I said, "Why not? The theater has had non-traditional casting for years. Cate Blanchett played Bob Dylan in a film a few years ago. Denzel Washington and Judi Dench have played the young Danish prince Hamlet when neither were young or Danish. There are countless examples here, many, too many to mention." I would say, though, that when I look in retrospect at that, the fact that I'm a white male at this moment, that I really think that I can see one basis of their shock beyond the general point. It's like if a group's been overrepresented, I mean, it's much better for Denzel Washington or Judi Dench to play Hamlet than for me to play, I don't know, Billie Holiday or something. I mean, so within that context, I see what they mean. But I was just speaking to the theoretical point that we have an individuality and a diversity that even transcends gender, race, ethnicity, etc. But I think that Judi Dench and Cate Blanchett and Denzel Washington examples are better examples than using me, because they're the presence of the white male domination of our culture has been oppressive. I think that's a factual matter. So I think it was a bad example. And this, by the way, shows some of what a real teaching style is. It's halting. It examines every step. It's an agony, really. Education is agony, and it's actually, it's not about what you know. It's about what you do with what you don't know. And it's not proceeding in certainty, particularly arts education or anything in the arts. What you do is, and I think the background as an improvisational actor is where I learned this. But I think I actually was like this before I was an improvisational actor as well. I mean, if you're gonna learn the arts, it's stepping into the unknown. So you have to deal with a lot of uncertainty. And I think for professional people, doing that is a very counterintuitive thing to do, because in their professional lives, they're they're expected to, their bread and butter, their reputation is based on having answers, knowing how it works, knowing what to do, knowing what the law is, knowing what the procedure is, knowing how to go about things. Now, if you want to throw yourself into the arts, it's basically being a human being, which is really, in terms of basic existence, every day is a surprise. I mean, uh, 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 things change. Life is a process of figuring things out. It's always dealing with the unknown. So, I didn't intend to have this discussion here, but I read this passage and I was thinking, well, I don't want to sound like I have some sort of attitude that's against some sort of political correctness, because quite quite the contrary. I mean, I'm 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 sick of the tyranny. I Now this is a problematic statement, but I've been oppressed by white males too, although certainly not as badly as you know, uh, based on race or gender. Really horrific. Not in terms of degree, it's not even close. Uh, but as an artist, you could see how it's not the greatest environment. The bully boy culture is not a great environment. So I've had my problems in that area too. Although again, nothing compared to the genuine atrocities in the history of for other groups. So, okay, let's get back to this. So we all have our professional roles too. I have life experience, which might give me a little more insight on them than many other people. And I've talked about this before. It's the diversity of my background: an actor, a comedian, an improviser, a teacher, a writer, a marketing executive, a college professor, and a trial lawyer. At first, I took on those different roles because I was searching, and now I realize that they're all the same things. The common denominator in all of the careers is that I showed up for work as a human being, and so did all of my peers, even if they were pretty lousy examples of human beings in some instances. You can't avoid it. You just can't. It's the essence of who you are. There's no getting around it. Um, the pillars of professional are the same for everyone in every job, and this is repetitious of what I wrote before. So that's obviously why this is a manuscript. Repetition works in a classroom, and it works verbally. I think some of these things should be repeated. Sometimes I've had students say, "Oh, you keep saying the same thing," or whatever, but in their action, they're not showing that they get it. So, you know, it stops being said when it's a fait accompli. There is an enormous diversity of types of people and work. There is also a common humanity to every type of person and job. And please read this book from the perspective of that common humanity. That, to me, is the whole point of art. Diversity is tremendously important. Individuality is important. And it's a diversity that goes beyond uh, race, gender, ethnicity. It's a diversity that actually goes to the individual person. I mean, each one of us is kind of a species unto ourselves. Everyone is unique in that way, like fingerprints. There's no, it's just the way it is. On the other hand, we all have a common experience. And art is found when universality and individuality are congruent to each other, when they intersect, when they meet. Because what is true for one person is true for another person, but the form is completely different. That's why we tell each other stories. That's why I can see 12 Years a Slave, the movie that shows the horrors of slavery, never been black, never took that kind of abuse, never dealt with that type of oppression, and yet I can be moved by it. Well, why can I be moved by it? Because as a human being, there's a part of me uh, actually all of me that relates to it, and this is what our so when people talk about communicating or connecting or presence or whatever, what are they talking about? They're talking about what is it really to connect with another person? To connect with another person is to be resonant with that other person. By the way, we don't connect with everybody. So this idea that, well, you're going to teach professional presence and then people are going to be able to go out and be successful and make sales and market and everything else because they're going to connect and be able to work well with everybody. It doesn't work that way. I mean, there are there are some people that you will never connect with, and you never want to. I don't particularly want to find common ground with a white nationalist. I mean, I don't want to connect with them. And sometimes you might want to connect with somebody, and and you don't. And I've had this experience a lot, and that can be a painful experience. But actually, by going through that process of the differentiation between you and the other, and the reason why you don't connect with them is actually that's more discovery about who you are, actually. So, okay, back to the text. I write many of the sections of this book from the perspective of one of the professions I've worked in. Please read the book from your perspective as a human being and apply any insights you like to yourself and what you do. What is true for the lawyer is true for the actor, is true for the teacher, is true for what you do. And I believe that actually it's been an impossible thing to brand or to communicate. I think I could do this class. I have done it actually with all of these groups, with lawyers, with business people, with actors, with teachers. I mean, it's the same for everybody. It you know, okay. Okay, introduction to ethical presence. Many professionals, defined as teachers and other academics, lawyers and other legal professionals, doctors and other medical professionals, creative and other arts professionals, and business, government, and nonprofit professionals of all stripes, are unaware of the relative ineffectiveness of their presentation, leadership, and group and one-on-one communication skills. And many other professionals are aware of their deficiencies but lack confidence and are intimidated by the prospect of improving those skills. And this book asserts, and my work asserts, that being authentic in the working flow of your vocation can be approached as an art form. It can be learned and developed experientially through the process of personally creating your own unique method of presentational interactive communication. Creating professional authenticity is a democratic, artistic process. Small d democratic. It is not only a realistic process for those who are perceived of as talented. No two professionals communicate in the same way. This book aspires to share some of my thoughts, methods, attitudes, and values in an effort to help professionals discover and explore their personal confidence, conscious authenticity, and creativity in their own way. Wow, as I go through this section, I think a lot of it's repetitive of the first video. I think the first video might even say it better. But I'm going to slog on here. Okay, and again, I'm not going to edit this out because I think if this is this is what the teaching process is like. All right, it's a work in progress. Okay, so the idea of being present is like it's a. I don't go into a classroom and present like a finished product. It's but that we work together on building it. So I'm working with you right now, and I'm asking for your patience. You know, you might be listening to this and not find it repetitive. You might find that certain things are sinking in. You might be bored by it or whatever, and you just have to hang in there and keep working through it. If it has resonated with you already, you know, probably in the first video. And that actually dovetails right into the next paragraph in the manuscript. Work on one's voice requires a commitment to hard work and deep and considered reflection. If one approaches this work, quote, for fun or as a hobby, they will get the equivalent results to the lack of demand that they put on themselves. Now, a major interest of mine is the experiential interrelationship between logic, critical thinking, substantive knowledge, and creativity, self assurance, awareness, and communication. My background as an attorney and in the improvisational theater has taught me how rationality and structure and spontaneity and emotion are complementary and equally necessary to the development of a strong professional presence. The fact that I had gone to law school helped me as an improviser at Second City. It helped me structure scenes. It helped me be focused in scenes, find themes, etc. And I could follow a creative logic. I mean, I came in. The Jesuits actually taught me how to think rationally. Law school, Loyola Law School, it was just the work on really applying that muscle all the time. So it helped me be more skillful at being logical and rational. The improvisational background helped me to be more free and spontaneous and to be creative. And I have found that they have related to each other. So being a lawyer helped me at Second City. Being an improviser helped me when I did trials at the ARDC because I was able to really spontaneously adapt to the situation, to read the hearing panel. It wasn't judge and jury. You had two lawyers and a layperson, and they would decide these ethics cases. I could read the hearing panel. It allowed me to adapt to where witnesses were going, and because but anyone who's ever done any kind of a trial knows that they don't go as expected. And this is actually, in my case, I picked up those skills by, again, I had them naturally. I was that way. That's what drew me to wanting to be an improviser, but I really honed them through doing the improvisation. So they're very interrelated, and I think a lot of times popularly they're thought of as an either or. You're either an artistic person or you're a technical person or whatever. Um, I don't think that's true. Artists learn and then, or contemporaneously, when they learn it, feel compelled to share what they learn with others. So an artist is never an expert, never. And an artist is always learning something new, learning, getting a little bit more insight into what's ultimately a mystery, which is the mystery of existence as a human being. And then they have some medium of communication, and they communicate it. This is what art is. So artists are then affected by the other's response to what the artists have offered, and so then, but it's a dialectic, it's a conversation. So the artist learns something and communicates it, and they're affected by the response that they get from the communication, and then they transform and live again and learn again. Like for example, in the beginning of video one of this series, I was talking about basically the frustration of going to lawyers or executive education programs or businesses and getting all sorts of interest in this work until they understood the amount of work that was involved in actually doing it, and then their belief that they knew more about what it is than they know. And that puts me back upon myself. And I'm really in a process now of transformation to see exactly where this fits, who's it for, who needs this, who wants this, what would be authentic adaptations. It wouldn't be an authentic adaptation to like dumb this down or make it superficial in order to satisfy groups that just want to pay lip service to it and don't want to do it. That would be a betrayal of my art and myself. I wouldn't do that. There could be other adaptations though, where it could be adapted to where the universals of this are respected, and someplace where there are real educators uh, that perceive this need and that have a kind of respect for it, which is necessary in order to teach. It's really necessary. When I was at UIC, I was different than the entirety of the faculty of the business school, and go into class, and there was a battle of whether um, I actually had like critical student reviews where they said, well, this is a lot harder and he asks a lot more than the other teachers that teach this subject. And those students thought that was inappropriate. And there was always a struggle in the classroom with those students. But then there was always a group of students that really responded to it and liked it, probably a majority of those students. And they would win the day. And usually within the scope of a 15-week course, there would be a blow up in the seventh or eighth week, about in the middle. There would be a blow up and an absolute rebellion by students that didn't think this had anything to do with professionalism or presence. They wanted something easier. They really didn't believe in art. And myself and the students that wanted it would win that power struggle and get the class to continue on the path it was on, which was on an authentic path. Some of the recalcitrant students would be converted, but many of them never would be converted, and it just wasn't for them. Now, I don't think you're ever not going to have that any sort of school where they're getting credits and it's something that they have to do and they're thinking they want to get a certificate so they get some sort of pass to the next thing that they want to do with their life. But I think what you need is the support of the institution, the organizing entity, to realize that this is what's going on and for them to have some commitment to real education is what I would call it. And I think at first, the program that I was in, one thing I'm very thankful for having been there because I got 5 years to really work on this stuff with students. And program when I was beginning, it was forming itself. So there was an openness, there was an opportunity because it didn't know what it was doing. But as the program went on, uh, it they never interfered with anything that I did with the classroom, but they really wanted to get rid of me because um, I was not going to uh, I was not going to do things the way the overall program uh, was doing it, which was a very superficial treatment of things. I mean, real busy classes with lots of exercises and keeping it moving and it was all it was like something at the learning center or at the Second City Training Center, which is really what it was based on, their approach. which is really not an arts approach. I mean, it's a business where people go and they make dates, and they they might they might work a little bit on their presence or whatever, if they want to stand up in front of people, and they get a little bit out of it. But it's not an artistic approach. An artistic approach is much deeper than that. The program at UIC was very concerned about the question of introversion, which really, once you commit yourself to art, it's not even an issue, because introversion is an egoistic concern. I mean, oh, I'm an introvert. Oh, I don't relate to people this way. Oh, this is a way to overcome it. This makes me feel better. I said this in another context about Van Gogh. What was I saying about? Oh yeah, the MacArthur grant. Say that that Van Gogh never worried about the MacArthur. Of course, it didn't exist when he was painting, but what did he spend his time worrying about? Almost all the time, it was his work: light, color, shape. It was creating art. It's the same thing. If you're so occupied with creating, with doing your job, you, you're not thinking about whether you're an introvert or not. That is that that is the problem is that you're not focused on what you should be focused on, which is your work. So, you know, I wasn't meant to be there. So it's like I wasn't meant to be there. And then I did this Richard Thomas JD LLC, the Ethical Presence Consulting, which was really consulting for teaching. And as I've talked to the law firms, the businesses, the executive ed programs, and it's all the same story. So it's like what this is, in a way, there's part of this. This is like a message in a bottle, because it's like basically, who is an educator like this? I was uh, I was reading in the I Ching, which is something I like to do. That basically it says, when it's in the hexagram on following, and it says that there's two lines that are next to each other, and one says, if you're following what's good, you necessarily have to break with what is childish and superficial. And then the next line says, is you naturally experience a loss by that break. But what it does is it opens up the room for people of real value, intellectual heft, and character, in which you can continue uh, your art. And I think I think that as really, it's kind of like the story of my life. And it seems like each step is a little bit better, but it's like breaking through one group to go to the other one, to go deeper into what it is that I do. So I worked. I was an improvisation student, and that was great. And I was an improvisational actor. I worked on the main stage at Second City, and that was good for a time. But then I started moving towards the lip of the stage and doing monologues all the time, and I was really breaking with what goes on with Second City. And somebody talked to me the other day, and they said, "Oh, great! The Second City background and everything. I love what you're doing." And he said, "Oh, well, do it at Second City or whatever." I said, "Do you see any relationship between what I write on this blog and what these videos are about? Anything that you see on the stage at Second City? I mean, I'm not part of that anymore. I appreciate it. I loved it while I was there up to a point, but then there was the same kind of loss. Then I was lost in the wilderness for a long time, but that was a good period too, because I just did a lot of reading, and I was living in New York, and I was working with an inside sales job, and I would just like wander around, go to the theater, read a lot of books, go to a lot of movies. I was basically alone. It was like this self-education. I was in my early 40s. It's not like I was a kid. And then out of that inside sales job, I got a marketing job that I did for a little while that I'm glad that I had that experience too. And they were nice people. But eventually that broke apart. That there was a lot of other things that happened, but it was largely I was saying, uh, I don't want to just do this marketing stuff. I mean, I have a law degree. Uh, I'm a smart guy. I want to do something of more substance. So eventually, I worked my way. That when I was 50, because I graduated from Loyola Law School in 1981, and then I sat for the bar when I was 50 years old. So I became a lawyer in 2006. You notice I'm not doing. First of all, I can't hide it anyway. You're looking at a video, but I'm doing nothing to hide my age. And no, I'm not retiring. And I think that I have a lot of years left to do what I'm doing. So I'm not apologetic about the age. So I became a lawyer, and then I got a job at a corporate law firm, which was like, ugh, but it got me to be a lawyer. But there was pain tearing away from every step because and the same thing at the ARDC. I mean, I'm working there. Frankly, I didn't like the disrespect that's a big part of the legal culture. And I'm seeing now that I was a little bit ahead of my time because I'm even seeing they're talking about in Springfield, like the Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, is starting to talk about the bad culture of Illinois politics. The legal profession has got a lot to clean up in that area, and the government is largely lawyers, but it's not only in the legal area. So there was that, but I also felt when I was at the ARDC, I said we're punishing a lot of these people, and really they need to be educated. And then that led me to go off on my own, and I did this with bar associations and the law schools, and supplemented it with adjunct teaching, and that got me. So that was in like 2011, and that got me into UIC, which I appreciated that job, and I liked that job. But after 5 years, the program had changed. Not that the program had changed. I mean, they didn't want me anymore because I was not going to dumb down what I was doing, and basically, that is a real artistic difference. I don't believe in what they're doing with that program. So then I started this business, and like I say, and what I'm finding is that I met with a guy. This is an example of it, but there were many meetings like this. Many, 20 or 30 meetings. They would look at my website, www.richardthomasjd.com. Everybody says it's an impressive website. I don't think they're only talking about the visuals, which they did a nice job with it, but I think there's a lot of writing on it. There's the blog, of course. There's a whole media page. There's like documentation of I'm not making any claims about everything and anything. I'm not making a claim about anything. I mean, it's all documented, and you can see a lot of writing and everything, and you can see the diversity of experience, and to say that I have a basis to talk about what I'm talking about. Everybody feels that way. So it worked as a marketing thing because what did I do with it? I made these emails and I sent them to people I thought would be interested all over the country, and I got all these phone meetings and a couple of personal meetings, and I discussed in the first video here what happened with that, and it's basically that they want this type of thing, but they don't want it in the depth that I offer. So So now I'm at the point, like, where does it go? And I'm completely confident that it will go somewhere, you know. But that's you know that's where that's at. Okay, so it's basically that is art. I mean, what I described as art, that's constant transformation with more and more information in terms of of who I am and where it fits. And that's the process that these classes introduce to my students. Artists such as myself, I'm back on the manuscript now, have much to teach professionals when the professionals reflect on the artist's work through the lens of their own experience as professional artists, whether or not they acknowledge their own artistic status. Many professionals explore art classes, improvisational acting, creative writing, etc., in an effort to improve their authenticity and presence. Taking such classes is a positive step. This initiative would be more effective, my initiative, my classes, because it links the art education to actual work experience and development. It connects what is usually just marginalized as personal enrichment with pragmatic professional development. Many workplaces have de facto apprenticeship programs and activities where more experienced professionals expose those junior to teaching strategies and plans that have been successful for the more established leaders of the firms. These approaches are useful, but they are more content driven than process driven. And I'm proposing process driven. A professional has to have mastery of content and equally be personally engaged with that content and, of course, the other stakeholders themselves. There are professional authenticity concerns beyond the obvious necessity of, quote, knowing the material. The apprentice approach doesn't address these concerns. It might give structures for delivering information. It doesn't help an individual discover how they personally can, quote, reach others. My approach is a broader and deeper consideration of what it is to be professionally authentic and effective. And it bears repeating that substantial artistry and professional development can only be achieved with dedicated, committed, and sustained work. It bears repeating. I know I've repeated it like a ton of times over these two videos. It's not enough to understand this topic conceptually. It is not only about approaches that you adopt, it's about something that you yourself become, maintain, and expand. My work aspires to stimulate its audiences to discussion, thought, and new creations of professional art. Okay, so I'm going to stop this one here, and then there will be a part 3.